Under the eternal stars that had watched over Mesopotamia since the first climate refugees settled between the rivers, the people of rival cities rested uneasily in their urban fortresses, exhausted by generations of warfare that had brought neither decisive victory nor lasting peace. The constant conflicts between city-states had created a world where no single power could dominate, but where none could find security either. Into this chaos of endless competition would step a man whose vision would transform the very nature of political power, not through divine appointment or royal inheritance, but through a dream so audacious it would reshape civilization itself. His name was Sargon, and his story would begin in the most humble circumstances imaginable. The reed basket bobbed gently on the waters of the Euphrates, carrying its precious cargo downstream from the city of Kish toward an uncertain destiny. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth and protected by prayers whispered by a mother whose heart was breaking, lay an infant whose birth had been attended by omens both terrible and wonderful. The child's mother, priestess in the temple of Kish, had received visions that spoke of greatness and catastrophe, of a son who would rise higher than any mortal before him, but whose path would be marked by struggle and exile. Unable to raise the child openly without bringing disaster upon her city, she had chosen the ancient recourse of desperate parents to entrust her baby to the mercy of the river and the gods who governed human fate. The basket came to rest in the shallows near a grove of date palms where Aki, a royal gardener, was drawing water for the palace gardens of Kish. Something in the infant's cry spoke to his heart, and he lifted the child from the river that had carried him to safety, giving him the name Sargon. Legitimate king, though the baby possessed neither royal blood nor political inheritance, Aki raised the foundling as his own son, teaching him the arts of cultivation that would serve as metaphor for the greatest political achievement in human history. In the palace gardens of Kish, Sargon learned that patient tending could transform desert into paradise, that water directed wisely could make barren ground bloom, that seemingly weak seedlings could grow into mighty trees if given proper care and protection. But young Sargon possessed ambitions that extended far beyond horticulture. As he grew to manhood, serving first as a gardener, then as a palace administrator, he observed the endless cycle of warfare that consumed Mesopotamian cities. He watched as armies marched and returned, as victories turned to defeats and defeats to victories, as the constant struggle for dominance exhausted the very civilizations it was meant to protect. In the royal court of Kish, where he eventually rose to serve as cupbearer to King Uzababa, Sargon witnessed the limitations of traditional city-state politics. Each city fought to protect its own interests, without regard for the welfare of the larger region. Alliances formed and dissolved based on temporary advantage rather than lasting principle. The gods were invoked to justify every conflict, their divine authority fragmented among dozens of competing interpretations. Sargon began to envision something that had never existed in human history: a single authority that could unite all the cities between the rivers, not through conquest alone, but through a political system that offered prosperity and security to all who accepted unified rule. This vision would require military power to achieve, but it would depend on administrative genius to maintain. The opportunity to transform vision into reality came when the aging king Uzababa, troubled by dreams that prophesied his overthrow by a servant, ordered Sargon's death. But the young cupbearer had already built networks of loyalty among palace guards and administrators who recognized his exceptional abilities. Instead of eliminating a potential threat, the assassination attempt drove Sargon into exile, where he could build an army free from royal oversight. Gathering followers from across the region, displaced soldiers, ambitious merchants, craftsmen seeking better opportunities, farmers tired of constant warfare, Sargon established a military base near the confluence of the Tigris and Euphrates. Here he built the city that would become his capital and give its name to his dynasty, Akkad, a planned urban center designed from its foundation to serve as the administrative heart of an empire. Unlike the traditional cities of Sumer, which had grown organically around temple complexes dedicated to local patron deities, Akkad was conceived as a cosmopolitan center that would welcome people from all the cities between the rivers. Its temples honored not just Akkadian gods, but the entire Mesopotamian pantheon, symbolically uniting divine authorities that had been fragmented by city-state politics. The army that Sargon assembled at Akkad represented another revolutionary innovation. Instead of citizen soldiers who fought part-time while maintaining other occupations, he created the world's first professional military force. Men whose full-time job was warfare, who trained constantly for combat, who developed loyalty to their commander rather than to any particular city or deity. This professional army gave Sargon advantages that no city-state militia could match. His soldiers fought with standardized equipment and coordinated tactics. They could campaign for months without returning home for planting or harvest. Most importantly, they served a vision larger than local interests. The dream of unified Mesopotamia, where trade could flow freely, where disputes could be resolved through law rather than warfare, where the innovations of each city could benefit all. Sargon's first major campaign targeted Lugal-Zaggisi, the ambitious king of Uruk, who had conquered several neighboring cities and proclaimed himself ruler of all Sumer. The conflict between these two men represented more than personal rivalry. It was a struggle between two competing visions of political organization, between expanded city-state rule and true imperial unity. The decisive battle took place on the plain between Uruk and Umma, where generations of city-state armies had fought without achieving lasting resolution. But Sargon's professional forces, disciplined and coordinated in ways that part-time militias could not match, overwhelmed Lugal-Zaggisi's coalition through superior organization rather than mere numbers. The capture of Lugal-Zaggisi and the conquest of Uruk sent shockwaves throughout Mesopotamia. The greatest of the Sumerian cities, home to the Epic of Gilgamesh and birthplace of writing itself, had fallen to an army led by a man who possessed no traditional claim to royal authority. If Uruk could be conquered, no city was safe from this new form of organized power. But Sargon's treatment of conquered cities revealed the wisdom that distinguished imperial vision from mere military ambition. Instead of destroying Uruk or enslaving its population, he incorporated the city into its growing empire while respecting its cultural traditions and religious practices. Sumerian scribes continued to serve in administrative positions, their expertise in cuneiform writing essential for governing territories that spoke different languages and followed different customs. The goddess Inanna, patron deity of Uruk, received honors in Sargon's new imperial pantheon alongside Akkadian gods. The great ziggurat continued to function as a religious center, its priests adapting their rituals to acknowledge imperial authority while maintaining the spiritual traditions that gave meaning to urban life. Trade networks that had been disrupted by constant warfare between city-states were restored and expanded under imperial protection. This pattern of conquest followed by integration allowed Sargon's empire to grow with remarkable speed. City after city opened its gates to an army that offered prosperity and protection rather than destruction and enslavement. Within a decade, Sargon controlled all of Mesopotamia, from the Persian Gulf to the Syrian desert, ruling territories that encompassed every major center of civilization in the known world. But Sargon's imperial vision extended far beyond the boundaries of traditional Mesopotamian civilization. His armies pushed westward into Syria and Lebanon, seeking to control the trade routes that connected Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean world. They campaigned eastward into the Zagros Mountains, establishing Akkadian authority over peoples who had never before acknowledged any foreign ruler. Most remarkably, Sargon's forces reached the shores of the Mediterranean itself, establishing imperial authority over lands that would not see such unified rule again for over 1,000 years. From the Persian Gulf to the Great Sea, from the mountains of Iran to the deserts of Arabia, a single political system now governed territories that encompassed dozens of different peoples, languages, and cultures. Managing this vast empire required administrative innovations as revolutionary as the military techniques that had conquered it. Sargon created the world's first professional civil service, a network of governors and administrators drawn from throughout the empire who served imperial interests rather than local loyalties. Communication systems using cuneiform writing enabled central coordination of policies across distances that would have been impossible to govern through oral tradition alone. Royal roads connected Akkad to every corner of the empire, allowing rapid movement of armies, merchants, and messages that kept the central government informed about local conditions. Standardized weights and measures facilitated trade across cultural boundaries, while imperial coinage provided a common medium of exchange that united diverse regional economies. Most importantly, Sargon established legal principles that balanced imperial authority with respect for local traditions. Cities that submitted peacefully retained their traditional forms of government under imperial oversight. Religious practices continued unchanged as long as they acknowledged imperial authority alongside local deities. Cultural diversity was preserved within political unity, creating a model for imperial administration that would influence every subsequent empire in world history. The transformation that Sargon's empire brought to daily life throughout Mesopotamia was profound. Merchants could travel from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean without fear of bandits or arbitrary taxation. Craftsmen could access materials and markets that had been impossible to reach during the era of city-state warfare. And scholars could visit libraries and temples throughout the empire, creating intellectual networks that accelerated innovation and cultural development. Perhaps most significantly, Sargon addressed the role of women in imperial administration through the appointment of his daughter, Enheduanna, as high priestess of the moon god Nanna in Ur. This appointment represented more than religious ceremony. It established Enheduanna as the most powerful woman in the empire, responsible for coordinating religious practices across territories that had never before acknowledged common spiritual authority. Enheduanna proved to be more than an administrator. She became the world's first known author, composing hymns and poems that survive to this day as masterpieces of Mesopotamian literature. Her works, written in both Sumerian and Akkadian, helped create a shared cultural identity that transcended the local loyalties that had previously divided Mesopotamian cities. Through poetry that celebrated both imperial achievements and eternal spiritual truths, Enheduanna articulated a vision of divine authority that embraced rather than replaced local religious traditions. Her hymns honored the gods of all Mesopotamian cities, while establishing new mythologies that justified imperial rule as part of cosmic order rather than mere human ambition. The empire that Sargon created from his capital at Akkad would endure for over 2 centuries, surviving rebellions, invasions, and the natural challenges that faced any political system governing such diverse territories. Its influence extended far beyond its geographical boundaries, establishing precedents for imperial administration that would guide every subsequent attempt at unified rule. The title King of the Four Quarters of the World that Sargon adopted reflected not arrogance, but a genuine attempt to create political authority that matched the scope of human civilization itself. For the first time in history, a single ruler governed territories that encompassed most of the known world, creating peace and prosperity on a scale that individual city-states could never achieve. As evening settled over the great city of Akkad, as oil lamps flickered to life in the palace chambers where administrators coordinated the affairs of the world's first empire, something unprecedented had been accomplished. Human political organization had achieved a scale and sophistication that matched the urban innovations, agricultural techniques, and cultural achievements that had emerged from the land between the rivers. In the royal archives, scribes recorded the tribute and taxes that flowed to Akkad from territories stretching from the mountains of Iran to the shores of the Mediterranean. In the temples, priests from throughout the empire participated in rituals that honored both local deities and imperial authority. In the workshops, craftsmen created works of art that combined traditional techniques with new materials and influences from across the known world. But perhaps most significantly, in the quiet chambers where Enheduanna composed her immortal poetry, the daughter of Sargon was creating literature that would speak across millennia about the possibilities and responsibilities of power exercised wisely. Her words, pressed into cuneiform tablets that would survive the collapse of empires, preserved the vision that had inspired her father's revolutionary achievement. Under the eternal stars that had witnessed the rise of the first cities, the development of writing, and the endless conflicts between competing city-states, the people of Sargon's empire rested peacefully in communities connected by roads, laws, and shared institutions that made possible a prosperity and security unknown in earlier ages. The age of city-states was ending. The age of empires had begun, but the foundations remained the same. The agricultural innovations, urban planning, writing systems, and religious insights that had emerged from the patient work of generations who transformed impossible wetlands into the cradle of human civilization. Tomorrow would bring new challenges to imperial rule, new threats from peoples who had not yet accepted unified authority, and the slow, patient work of governing territories more diverse than any previous ruler had attempted to control. But tonight, in the palace of Akkad, where a foundling rescued from the Euphrates had become the world's first emperor, the dream of unified humanity had achieved its first great expression. The pattern was established, the precedent was set, and the vision of empire would shape human politics for thousands of years to come. Our journey through the corridors of time continues as Sargon's revolutionary empire inspires imitators and successors who will refine the arts of imperial rule. Discover how Babylon, a humble city on the Euphrates, will rise to create the world's first comprehensive legal code that balances justice with mercy, establishing principles that govern civilized society to this day. The wisdom of Hammurabi awaits.